Hey everyone, in this episode I get to follow up on my previous one about Blocktober and also talk about one of the most frequently asked questions that I receive when speaking to you, the amazing gurus. Hey everyone, I hope you're well, playing and or making the games that you all love. You're joining me, your host, Max Pears. I'm really happy that you're here with me today, and then we're going to have a really good time overall, and it's going to be a really cool one. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to be answering one of the most commonly asked questions today, and that is about how do you work with art on your level design? How do their involvement change up the level design? So it's a really exciting one because, as mentioned, I get asked this a lot. So finally get to do a whole episode I think is fantastic, as well as a great continuation from my talk on the previous episode of Blocktober. But before we jump into the meat and potatoes of this episode, let's give a huge thank you to the sponsor of today's episode,
Outstandly.com.
For those of you who don't know, Outstandly is a great place that crafts unique and excellent art for games, for your games. If you lack the skill, like myself, to make art, then Outstandly is the place to go. Because many of us know one of the most big selling points and drawing eyes of players comes from the art. So if you want to help sell your game and make it look even better, then Outstandly is the place you should go. It's full of amazing people, really nice people to work with. Not only that, but they have such a diverse skill set and portfolio, so you know when you speak to them that they're going to bring something that's unique to your game. Not something generic, but something that you'll feel will match what you're after and are looking for. But not only that, if you mention that you've come from the level design lobby, you will actually be given some bonus goodies as well. That can range from, again, depending on the size of your project, can range as characters, animations, or even UI art. All of that when you tell them you come from the level design lobby. A great bunch of people. So if you're looking to take your game further and to find that the art style that best suits your mechanics, check out
Outstandly.com.
A link of them will be in the description down below. Now, with that said, we're talking about how to work with art in level design. Now, I mentioned this a little bit in previous episodes. I think episode 12, and I think, is it 26 or 36? One with Martha and Vord, where they talk about concept, and I chat about them with how we work together in terms of pipeline, as well as one with Dan Hargreaves as well. The link of their episodes will be down in the description as well. But one of the things that I'm constantly asked is, what's it like to work with art? And, you know, I think people get in their head that there's always this battle between art and level design. That's not true. I think there is obviously disagreements because we're making the same game, but we're looking at different aspects. But that is the most amazing and powerful thing of when you team up with artists on your level. Now, as I mentioned, we talked about the process of Blocktober, what we should consider. So with that in mind, let's kind of take this on as if we're working on a project after you finish your level. So you've got your block out done, and you will then start working closer with the artist. Now, in theory, you should be kind of keeping them in the loop before you do the block out. Obviously, sometimes production can get a bit crazy, but try to make sure that you do keep them in mind, as well as in the loop of what's going on with your level, because it's super important of this, because they need to understand what you're trying to do with that level. Now, we mentioned before creating a folder of references and also your 2D map. Keep that there so you can give them the information that they need, as well as obviously what the objectives are for this level, and so on. What's the theme? Where does it take place? All these kind of things, and then you can talk with the artist there. Now, what they'll do, again, this can kind of range from things, but they'll kind of look at, I guess, refining the architectural style, if it's an interior and inside a building. And with that in mind, it depends on certain things, because sometimes I know that there's some places where that architectural style is researched in the beginning, which obviously helps when you're making a level. But I've also seen it where times where you just block this out and then they will kind of adapt the actual block out with the architecture. So maybe the shapes of pillars change, the ceilings will kind of change in terms of look. But really, you should kind of have that down before you do your block out. But with that in mind, you should then start communicating with them and going back and forth with kind of what you had in mind in this area, and this is kind of the overall look. Now, one of the things that I've noticed in my time in the industry, and this is not a dig at anyone, because everyone is busy, obviously there are tight deadlines within the industry, but artists don't tend to play the mission that your level's in. It just, not always, but I've seen this happen a lot, because again, deadlines are super important. So one of the things that I recommend that you do is you play that with them. You either sit them down and run through it, or you give the controller to them, depending on how you want to do it. I think it's better for you to run through first, just before you let them play, solely on the fact that you can sell what is it you're after. You know the crucial beats, you know the moments, you know why is this corridor important, what is the aim of this corridor, for example. It's not just any old corridor. And then break that down from there. So once they kind of have an understanding of how the actual game itself, level itself works and is connected, then you can start going through them in detail of what kind of is an important space for gameplay. Now this is very important. This is important because the fact that obviously things change, they are looking at a level very differently to how we're looking at it. And that's not wrong at all. That's great because they're seeing things that we're not and helping the level get even further and make it even better. But sometimes that means that they can step on the toes of level design only because they're unaware of what's safe to use and what's not. Now, it is super important to highlight to them, again, the rooms which are gameplay heavy and the rooms that are not. I say this a lot when I answer this question, but it's just one of the most simplest things to do because the fact is you're working with them. You're not telling them how to do your level. You're not taking control away from them. This is a collaborative process. They're going to make your level better. And in turn, you're going to help push their art better in terms of gameplay as well when you come back to the location. But this is a very simple way because it helps them understand kind of what areas they can really go crazy with. It allows them to have a greater feeling of freedom, I think, and that's what you want from your team. You don't want to feel like it's a dictatorship. They should only do it your way. You want them to feel that they have an input as well. So by separating it that clearer, it helps them again to really understand and sell, and push these certain areas which you might not care for. Because sometimes those corridors, which are just a transition space, come up being really nice and really cool because the artist knows that they have the freedom to go a little bit crazy and create something even better, which, is always important. But then after that, it's important to kind of go through the micro details in terms of cover. For example, cover placement, if we're doing a shooting kind of area. It's important for them to know kind of which cover is really important and which kind of areas are important. Because the cover that you place doesn't always need to stay the same. It can adapt and things can be moved around. But certain things like flanking routes, maybe for example, if we're say we're in a construction site and we have some sort of a flanking route with pipes. And the player can run through these pipes to go create a flanking route for the player. Now you need to sell that to them because obviously needs to make sure it's in the theme and context, but you don't move these pipes because this is why it's important there. But some of the other cover, go for it. Or other things in their space, go for it. Change around, move around. And I think that's a big thing there. Again, just let them know what's important. For example, a loot room. That doesn't need to be controlled. You need to I just need a space for loot. And then, you can suggest a few themes, like maybe it's a security room, maybe it's a bathroom, maybe it's a storage room. But again, just chatting to them so that they understand what it is. And again, they can pick and choose. It's not about having control and artists must do what we say and it's not fair that they don't. No, they do great things for our levels. So again, just communicate with them. I think sometimes the best relationships I've had is by talking to my artists, by letting them know and keeping them in the loop all the time. And just again, really letting them know which space is super important and why I need it. Because sometimes in our blockouts, we're happy with it, but we don't always need everything in that blockout. I know it's nice to see it go all the way and have that ownership, but it's not fun for them to come in and you're also losing some great sense of creativity and a new fresh pair of eyes that are looking at it from a different perspective, which I think is super important. So that's how I think you should go about. After you've done your meeting and your setup, they should start doing like their first pass and that onto your location. And they should be, again, keeping you in the loop. Now, what's important as well, and I do think this is really important, when you have your kind of kickoff meeting, after you two have done it, I think it's always important to have a sync with not just yourself and the artist, but it's important to get your leads involved, your level design lead and your art lead, so that, again, everyone can say that they're on the same page, that they can approve it together simultaneously. Now, before you get to your lead kind of meeting, you should kind of have kind of a pitch in mind. The references you've got, they should become a bit more narrower. They should either come with either some paint overs from the concept artist when you've all synced together, or kind of, here's a corridor, but this is a picture of a corridor that we like, and then we're kind of going forward with. And then you will, again, be already chatting to your level design lead to talk about, what's happening in this corridor. And then once that's done, everyone's kind of on the same page. Because it's so easy to lose communication. And obviously leads will have some great input for you as well. And I think it's important to get them together. So that way, it's all communicated across all boards. You're not, the man in the middle running as the messenger. And what's also great here is both leads might see something that you two do not, you and your artist, which again will raise up a bigger discussion, which will again help push your level even further forward. And it's all things like that which come in handy and help go from this and keep going and move you forward. And after this, they will then hopefully now move forward, if there's no changes, to start doing their art pass. And this is in mind as well, they won't keep. And in a lot of editors, such things as like cover, maybe AI spawning areas, splines, artists will turn that stuff off 9 times out of 10 when I've seen it. And I get why, but it can kind of be infuriating. But that's okay. Just let them know about certain areas as well, and you can always go back. And what happens after they've done their pass is then you should go in and do your pass on your level. You should be checking for exactly what I just pointed out. Are there kind of props, are there props on your important game design stuff? Is it blocking at the interaction? Is it stopping enemies from being spawned? Are they trapped, for example? And then it's important for you to do that and then go back and forth. Because there might be something that they've done that you might think, okay, this works, but we need to change this about it. Or they might have a cool idea which you've not thought of, and it just is awesome, and now we're going to move the gameplay around that to facilitate that. So there's always going to be things changing with that. And again, just talking to your artist is always super fantastic for it. And then what you'll find from this is this will kind of rinse and repeat a couple times over with alpha to beta, to the final polish of your level, where they'll be doing stuff and then the artist will be doing a pass on your level, and then you will follow afterwards to, again, just double check that everything works. And as I was saying, they should be keeping contact, as should you, just talking about changes. Now, sometimes you can completely just go in and move boxes and crates around, but what I recommend is if you are going to change something about the environment, do let them know. Do let them know that this is the change and this is why. Because sometimes, say, for example, we've done the alpha pass, and I've been like, oh, there's some cover missing on this catwalk because the rails are just all see-through, but I know there's going to be combat because some of the enemies are up there to shoot up, so I don't want the players to just shoot them instantly. And then you add some like rails with cover on them, and then the artist is like, oh, I don't remember placing them there, and just return it back to just clear railings. And so letting them know that there's things that you've changed is always important. So again, you're always on that same page. After that, then some things that may be bigger that you may need changing, speak to them about it. Again, ask them, point out that this needs to change because X, Y, and Z with the gameplay. And then your artist can come up with some cool stuff there, because sometimes you may not have the solutions for some of the feedback, or you might be running out of ideas. So by talking to your artist, you two can team up and generate new ideas to help problem solve. Remember, 2 heads are always better than 1. I think that's one of the most important things from this, is that communication is key, and that artists are not the enemy, and they're not trying to do anything wrong to the level, it's always important for all of us to understand and know that we're all trying to make a fantastic game. It's very rare that someone is trying to sabotage a project. I have not seen that yet. I'm sure someone has at some point, for sure, but all of us are trying to make something great. But it can be lost in translation or in just bad communication. As I said, one of the things that causes a lot of problems from level design side is the fact that artists don't play the level that they're working on 9 times out of 10. And again, I'm not saying that as a dig. It's just what happens when production ramps up. And so it's important, I think, for you to make sure that they know what's going on, whether that just be a simple fly through or just playing the game in front of them. All of that can be, resolved very quickly. Communication, like anything in the games industry, is super crucial and super important. And what you'll find is artists tend to be the ones that you will work with the most. Game design is another, or mission design as well, but artists with level design is the biggest probably partner of it. And there shouldn't be, any animosity. There's always jokes, and I always think that they're funny. But, this is super important, and everyone wants to make something great. So always making sure that you're communicating. Now, with that as well, when it comes to the propage as well, this is a very interesting one because, again, working at different studios have different methods. Now, sometimes you will just do the simple blocks. If you saw any of my videos from my blockouts, my first pass is generally just these kind of cover boxes placed all around the level. And that way they're kind of open for the artist to interpret. But it's important for them to know what type of cover, the length of the cover, the height, etc. All of that. However, what we saw with my blockout is that sometimes you'll go more detailed. But I think a big thing to do with this is make sure the artist understands that these are suggestions. Obviously, the rooms, they're important. Like, if this is a bathroom and then they change it completely to a conference room, okay, well, that's something worth talking about. But just letting them know that, these are my suggestions. This is what the room is meant to be, but these are my suggestions in terms of what the cover should be, in what the propage should feel like. Because again, I really want to stress this, that you to work well with others and to make people want to work with yourself, the last thing you want is people saying, oh yeah, that guy may make good level, that guy or girl may make good levels, but they're an arsehole to work with. That's not what you want. You want people to be excited to work with you. You want them to know that this is something that you love and that as a team, you're going to make this even better. So yeah, again, just let them know that these are in fact just suggestions for them to take up and learn from. But that there is kind of where we are going to wrap things up a little bit. I think this one's a little bit shorter, but I think that's just more because I've answered a lot of this in previous episodes. And when you break it down, it is just so simple. Communicate from the very start. Keep communication happening. Play the game with them. Talk to them. And just encourage them as well. I think one of the things that people, and this is culturally different things as well. Like being here in Poland, Polish are a lot more kind of direct with their feedback versus English. And I'm not saying there's a worse or better way. It just depends on the culture that you've grown up and been acclimatized to. But one of the things in England is a compliment sandwich, as we call it, where if you are having some feedback, you say, oh, I really love what you've done with the main entrance. I think this is really cool. This is here. And then you come in with the feedback, which is, okay, but if we look at the conference room, this could need a little bit of work because now I can't get the combat in because there isn't enough space metrically. There's no cover to flank around, these sort of things. And then go, but I love what you're doing with the exit. I think the exit stands out and it's really, really nice what's going on there. So these sort of things here, just to help them know. Because I think it's always important, especially when things change so often, you get loads of reviews done and sometimes your content gets cut. And by sometimes, I mean a lot of the time, not because anything's bad, just, films as well. Content gets cut as things develop. So just letting them know that you appreciate their time and work is always important because they are working hard, as are you. So why not make this better? And again, make it feel like it's a better experience to work with someone this way. All right, everyone, I'm going to start to wrap this up. So If you want to reach out to me, you can do so on Twitter at MaxPairs, where I put out bite-sized level tips and where you can learn from me there, as well as find out more information about the level design lobby and maybe other things that I'm working on. If you want to reach out to me via email, you can do so leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. And a big shout out again to Outstandly. If you're looking to make your game improve and to have great art for your game, then do head out to their website, Outstandly. Link in the description down below. Alright everyone, take it easy, and I'll catch you all next time.